Hello people and welcome to the International Wrestling Podcast on this Extreme Rules Day, as you will be getting two Super Sundays with myself and Dave Long, and also there will be a review of Extreme Rules going up about an hour after the pay-per-view. I'm hoping to get one up. If it's a very explosive pay-per-view, it might take a bit longer as I'll be going more depth into it, but basically it'll be around an hour and a half after the pay-per-view. Now, what's the first one today is going to be a look back at Backlash with myself and David. But Dave, there was an incident last night where there was 3 or 4 incidents as this Extreme Rules reunion really went the way I expected it to. It was a Shane Douglas love fest as he put himself into the main event. He didn't moderate the guys. Sabu had to be taken to hospital. Just incredible pulled off the show. I really don't think this should have went ahead.
No, it's a total disaster, and again, it's a reflection on Shane Douglas's ego. I mean, this is a guy who pathetically tried to start something at a Monday Night Raw, and I just don't know anyone that was buying into that bullshit he did a couple of weeks ago. Very timid, very tame effort for him to get publicity. Now, they did draw a good crowd here, 2,100, but they really pissed a lot of the fans off by not giving them what they wanted, which is what it was advertised to be, an extreme reunion. There was none of the ethics, none of the passion of ECW apart from the Jerry Lynn match.
Yeah, the Jerry Lynn match was the only thing that got the crowd going. That should have been main event. During the main event, there was Shane Douglas versus Scorpion, I believe, and there was a pile of fuck you Shane chants and we want refunds.
Yeah, and I think people that attended that show are fully justified in wanting a refund, because from what I've read, it didn't live up to what it was billed as.
Yeah, it's not, like, let's face it, as much as we love ECW, I think it's time we all stay. ECW is dead.
Been dead a long, long time, my friend. It's been dead about 11 years now.
And these homecomings, you look at TNA a couple of years ago with their hardcore justice, it's just pathetic.
The best respect that was ever paid to it was One Night Stand 2005, and that's where it should have ended.
It should have.
It got a great send-off that night.
Yeah, that was the perfect.
Now, I enjoyed One Night Stand 2006 as well, because it still had elements of ECW. But that really, you know, once the brand was relaunched and once you had a fucking zombie coming out on Sci-Fi the first episode, the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, that was the end of it. The zombie killed it. No, saying that, ECW was not as bad as everyone claims it to be. It was a different kind of ECW. But near the end, when you had William Regal, when you had Christian, when you had the young Sheamus, when you had Shelton Benjamin, it wasn't as bad, but yet again, people kept comparing it to the old ECW.
Yeah, it should have been renamed, though. You know, you can't blame people for comparing it because it was called ECW. It should have been rebranded at that stage.
It should have, because it was a good brand. I always say during that stage, ECW was one of the best brands around. It was better than the Raw brand, which wasn't too hard back then.
No, certainly wasn't.
You know, but we are going to preview Backlash. That is pre-recorded, but we just thought we'd explain here. And Dave, it was just, Shane Douglas just can't even go that he can't get booked anywhere else, and he decides to pull this shit last night. It was just about pretty much boosting his own ego.
Yeah, we know a lot of people in the wrestling business that love to do that.
Yeah, it just really pisses me off that Shane Douglas fucking pulls this crap, pulls himself in the fucking main event where, let's face it, the only thing he's known for in ECW is dropping a fucking belt.
Well, I mean, like, you had a lot of people turning down bookings. I mean, Simon Dean, Hollywood Nova, he didn't want to be part of that BWO shit they were doing.
Yeah,
so they had to get Stevie Richards in with some other guy that was back in the early 90s of the BWO. So they were scraping the barrel. I mean, Al Snow, C.W. Anderson, no disrespect to those guys, but I think they're well past their sell-by date at this stage, and I think that was reflected in the fact that none of the fans got into that match last night.
Yeah, and then everyone's saying, oh, it's terrible what happened with Sabu. You can say what you want about WWE and TNA, but when they brought these guys in, they were monorail them. Shane Douglas, I say, just didn't give a shit, and I say they were partying hard the night before, and something like this was bound to happen.
So we've heard the stories when Sabu was over in this country, Jared, the kind of crazy shit he was getting up to. This guy has deep issues that are outside the bounds of professional wrestling, and I really believe that the WWE and TNA have done well to cut their links with the likes of Sabu. Just incredible. There's awful issues involved, and you know, I fear for their futures, but at the same time, you got to look in the mirror and take personal responsibility for what you're doing in your life, and I just don't think they're doing that at the moment.
I don't, and really, it's a shame that if this is the last thing that ever happened with ECW, even though they couldn't use the name last night, everyone knew it was ECW. If that's the last thing they ever get out the ECW name, it's a terrible way for it to end, Dave.
And a terrible indictment on fucking Shane Douglas, who I never liked, you.
Nobody
Never
ever
liked
likes
him.
that prick. So let's face it, the only reason he did that shit last night, Dave, is he can't get booked anywhere else.
He hasn't a good word to say about anybody.
Yeah. He thinks he was a fucking star in the making. He was an overrated piece of shit. Yes, he was good in the ring, but like, he wasn't
He
spectacular.
can't handle that he's not up there in the upper echelons of the business. But he
And
needs
another
to build,
issue
he
that
needs to build a bridge.
Another thing that was really shunned last night, and something that really pissed me off, and this is something that hasn't really been talked about, is the video before the show. They showed all the wrestlers that sadly passed away since the demise of ECW, and they shunned Chris Benoit.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with him. Like, it was supposed to be a film about everyone that passed away. They just showed pictures. I don't know why they couldn't show Benoit.
I don't know either.
Well, people, we will now take you to myself and Dave 3 days ago as we look back at the past backlashes. And later today, we will have talk about Extreme Rules later tonight on pay-per-view. Hi people, welcome to a very special edition of the International Wrestling Podcast, as this will now be the way to go forward every month, and that's to look back at past pay-per-views in the month of April. Next month will be obviously May, but I'm honoured to be joined by Mr. David Long.
Jer, anybody who knows me knows how much I love going back every month and watching the old pay-per-views, refamiliarising myself with what went down on certain pay-per-views. And, you know, really, if you're to look back on the month of April, and particularly we're focusing on the pay-per-views that were dominated by Backlash, I think we got to start at Backlash in '99, Jer, coming off WrestleMania 15. It was just a tremendous main event, Austin and The Rock, and in my opinion, it was better than their match at WrestleMania 15. The build-up was tremendous.
Yeah, well, Austin always stated that he did have personal problems going into WrestleMania 15. He had a big point to prove in this Backlash that he could actually put The Rock over in a match.
And I really think he did a superb job. This was so much high intensity and just... It's a match that never gets talked about now, but it is a match, in my opinion, that stands the test of time.
It had a great build-up with the funeral for Austin, with him getting thrown off the bridge.
That was just superb.
You know, and then the Smoking Skull belt, The Rock actually having that, and Shane McMahon as the special guest referee. And of course, this pay-per-view ended with the abduction of Stephanie McMahon Homesley.
I mean, you wouldn't say that nowadays, would you? It was just ahead of its time and so dark, and I just loved every bit of it, to be quite honest with you.
This pay-per-view also had the second Boiler Room Brawl on pay-per-view as Mankind defeated the Big Show.
It was shocking shit by Paul White, who'd only come in February of that year and was already struggling, flatlining, you name it, any term you want to use. He was really struggling to adapt to life of the World Wrestling Federation. It wasn't the cakewalk that he had experienced in the other company, and the Boiler Room Brawl, to me, certainly not up to the standard of SummerSlam in '96, but got to give Mick Foley credit. He did all he could with that fat lard.
And another issue in this pay-per-view that got a lot of controversy backstage was that Triple H and X-Pac, Shawn Walton, completely went overtime.
Yeah, well, that was not a surprise back then. These two were two of the biggest egomaniacs in the business at this stage, so to hear that they went overtime shouldn't surprise anybody.
And of course, people still pissed off to this day that Viscera and Test did not make the pay-per-view. Only dark match for them too.
I mean, come on, Viscera was on a roll with the whole change in the gimmick, been inducted by the Ministry only a couple of months earlier. Sure, he was well worth his place on the pay-per-view ahead of all the other bullshit that went down on it. But Backlash 2000, Jerry, it's one of my personal favourites. It was such a great pay-per-view, had so many title matches, and I think Jericho and Benoit proved they were main event players on this particular night. Really had a great match. And again, the hilarious shit that Paul White did, I have to give him credit. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but that match with Kurt Angle when he came out as Hulk Hogan, it was tremendous. The crowd just went ballistic, and White showed that he does have charisma.
Yeah, but a lot of problems with Kurt Angle at this pay-per-view. He just came in a couple of months before that as Survivor Series, was on a fantastic role, and now he was ending up jobbing to people like the Big Show on Backlash.
Still bounced back from it though, and that's something you got to give him credit for, because he would go on then to win the King of the Ring later on that year. But I do take your point that this was probably his lowest ebb in the company.
Another notable thing about this pay-per-view was, of course, that The Rock finally defeated Triple H. This was a long build-up to The Rock finally getting to beat Triple H. Triple H held that belt a long time going into this Backlash.
This was a clever idea, Jer, because everybody, the World Wrestling Federation knew that people were going to buy WrestleMania, and that's why they gave us the Fatal 4-Way. They held off the one-on-one match between The Rock and Triple H specifically for Backlash, and if you look back on the pay-per-view buy rates record, this Backlash did one of the best buy rates ever for a non-WrestleMania pay-per-view. So I think this pay-per-view, really, with the Austin factor, the fact that he'd blown up the DX Express from the SmackDown before, there was a great buzz going into this pay-per-view.
And Shane McMahon was yet again special guest referee
for 2 years in a row. And great shit with Earl Hebner getting involved as well, Linda McMahon, you name it, everybody was involved. The only issue I had with this pay-per-view, and it was nothing to do with the pay-per-view itself, was that it was shown on Channel 4 at 1:50. We were 50 minutes behind. There was bullshit ad breaks. Channel 4 didn't pay proper respect to one of the best pay-per-views of all time. Would have much rather it on Sky Sports.
Yeah, if I quite remember, it actually didn't finish until 6 o'clock in the morning.
But really, I mean...
And it completely ruined the main event, if you don't mind me saying, when it was done in black and white for the last half of it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because they cut the blood out and everything, and it just looked absolutely ridiculous.
I remember getting the video a couple of months later, really enjoyed watching it back properly.
Yeah, you get a different perception of it, because like, no matter what you say about blood, this, that, and the other, you know. But now we go to Backlash 2001, and this took place in the Rosemount, Illinois, where we will be for Extreme Rules.
Yeah.
You know, that is an arena with so much history.
So much great moments, but I got to be honest with you, man, this isn't a Backlash I remember fondly. Don't like those type of matches where they have tag matches with all the titles on the line. I thought it was a weak main event coming off one of the biggest WrestleMania of all time at that time, and still stands the test of time now. This Backlash, to me, don't look back on it fondly. Just thought they were going into a bit of a lull period.
Yeah, I think the problem they had there is they should have done Austin one-on-one with The Undertaker and Triple H one-on-one with Kane.
Which they would do at Judgment Day, but as you say, they should have done it at Backlash.
Yeah.
People were hungry for one-on-one action. They didn't want a tag match with all the titles on the line. And I got to say as well, as much as I like The Undertaker and Kane at this time, it would have been better off seeing the Hardys go against Austin and Triple H, because this was around the time all that shit was going on with the Hardys and the two-man power trip.
Yeah,
so,
but Matt Hardy won the...
for me to see them bumped off this big spot. It was literally about 1 or 2 weeks beforehand that The Undertaker and Kane shoved the Hardys to the side and declared that they were going for it. You know, I think it would have been better to see the Hardys get a main event slot on pay-per-view.
Yeah, but Matt Hardy was too busy winning European titles. Of course, this match also has the infamous Shane O'Mac dive.
Now, that was tremendous. I enjoyed that match, I have to say. It was the saving grace of the pay-per-view. And Shane O'Mac, you've got to respect everything that he's done in the business for a non-wrestler, and I'm saying that in inverted commas. He really put in everything he could, and tremendous match.
But a match that doesn't get a lot of respect and is actually a very good match if you go back and watch it. It's the Ultimate Submission match between Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle. This match got a half an hour.
It's like what we said on an earlier podcast, Jeremy, and you appreciate this style of wrestling. Technical wrestling at its best between these two. I really thought they had great chemistry, and of course they go on in pay-per-views after this and years later to prove that they did. But yeah, you're right, this was a great match. And
a match, of course, that ended a very long-standing feud was when William Regal finally defeated Chris Jericho in the Duchess of Queensberry rules match. I don't know what the hell that is, but...
That was just the most bizarre stipulation I've ever seen.
This was a feud that actually got time.
Yeah, but see, back then they did give time to feuds, in fairness to the World Wrestling Federation. They did actually let the feuds play out, and they went the whole hog with them, whether people liked them or not. They did give everything to each feud.
Well, Dave, 1 year later I know in the last couple of years you haven't had great love for the man, but I'm sure next year's Backlash shows some great memories for yourself.
Does indeed. It holds tremendous memories in Kansas City when Hollywood Hulk Hogan won his 6th World Wrestling Federation Championship. Really, never thought I'd see it. And I just couldn't believe that it actually went down. And if you remember correctly on this, it actually wasn't originally scheduled to be Triple H and Hulk Hogan. That was changed a couple of weeks beforehand by Vince McMahon. You know, he literally had to give in to the weight of emotion and the support that Hogan was pulling in at this point.
Well, let's face fact, there was money to be made.
There was money to be made. And you know, people have often asked me, and I want your opinion on it, Jer. I mean, how pissed off would you have been if you were Triple H after coming back off an injury, getting the big storyline and getting the win at WrestleMania and then having the job out to Hogan 4 weeks later? I don't know. I don't think that always sat well with Mr. Levesque, and I think that might be the reason why he's always held a little bit of bitterness towards Hulkster.
It probably is, because, like, a thing at the time was very hot, The Undertaker. And I said two of them would have worked a great program together, but... Yeah. You know, the plans were made, they were in motion, then suddenly it was all just cut aside because of the crowd at WrestleMania. Now, there's for and against that. Like, if you're going to listen to one crowd or one crowd reaction, you're going to end up changing your things every day of the week, Dave.
Yeah, but this was special, what had happened at WrestleMania 18, and, I mean, it didn't last long either, you know what I mean? It was only a month title reign, but I think it was a nice nod to Hogan to say, look...
This was a very interesting pay-per-view, because this pay-per-view also had the pay-per-view debut of the next big thing, Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, I thought he performed very well on the grand stage of pay-per-view. Didn't really show much nerves or anything. I just thought he was tremendous in this pay-per-view, and of course it wouldn't be any surprise that he moved on very quickly up the ladder.
And yet again, after he's been bumped off WrestleMania, your favourite Paul White was bumped off this card.
Yeah, and I didn't have any issue with that. I thought it was justified, and I thought a great feud of Backlash 2002 and a tremendous match that doesn't get enough recognition was Kurt Angle and Edge. Tremendous match they put in at Backlash 2002.
And that was that went forward to the hair versus hair match, if I'm quite correct.
Yeah, this was only the beginning of it, and it was really tremendous. It was around the time of the You Suck t-shirt being launched.
But this, the match of the night for me has to be a very underrated match. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker. The one thing that always kind of pisses me off is that every time these two guys got into the ring together, it was gold. But they never ever had that big marquee match.
I just thought this match was tremendous, and I enjoyed Ric Flair's involvement in it as well, and there was a great ending as well, if you remember, where there was a comment by Flair saying shit when he made the mistake. It was just so out of... We weren't expecting that.
Yeah, you kind of get said it wasn't on Channel 4 back then.
It certainly wasn't.
But
no, I thought this pay-per-view delivered, and as you say, had it not been for Hogan's upsurge, I've no doubt we would have seen The Undertaker, Triple H at this pay-per-view. But I also think this was the start of the time when you could sense from Austin, Jer, that he was starting not to give a shit.
I would say that was a great match, Dave.
No, but how pissed off was he in terms of what was going on? And, you had Hogan coming in on one side, you had Lesnar coming in on the other. The whole thing, it was no surprise really that he kind of fell apart in the end. But the draft, this was the first pay-per-view of the draft, yeah. And you could already see signs that it wasn't going to work. I mean, the bullshit they had with Scott Hall and Bradshaw, I mean, that was...
Well, not just let's move forward though a year if you want to go on about bullshit. And I want to go on with Shane O'Hara defeated Rikishi on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, Backlash 2003 coming off the back of WrestleMania 19. This pay-per-view though is historic and still gets talked about to this day because
it's Scott Snyder and Rico.
It's a shocking moment, but no, I mean it had the first match between Cena and Lesnar, and I thought it was a good feud going into this. Of course now it's got relevance with Lesnar being back on the scene now, and
that's one thing I'm always upset about, that they never played up on these two guys' back history yet.
Well, they have kind of, haven't they? I thought they had kind of played up on that.
Outright. There's been kind of needle here and there, but not outright. Cena hasn't really come out and said, I made my chops off Brock Lesnar. That's something he should really come out and say. And Brock needs to say that, like, Cena used me to get to the top back in the day, and look what happened to him, I destroyed him. Yeah,
but Cena was a good heel back here. I gotta give him credit for that.
But of course, the main event that night was Goldberg defeated The Rock. A lot of people
loved the comedy set in the pre-match promo with Lillian Garcia calling him a whisker biscuit bitch. Absolutely brilliant.
I dubbed it this. I love Hollywood Rock. That 3 month stint was probably the best 3 months The Rock did in a very, very, very long time.
Got to talk about the fact that good old JR wasn't at this pay-per-view. Really missed him for the big time moment, yeah.
Yeah. But poor Jim.
I don't even want to get started on that 6-man tag. Fuck's sake, Triple H.
Got the most time in the pay-per-view, by the way.
Fucking dying.
But a match on this card that never gets any recognition, yet again I'm pissed off about that, was T-Bag against Los Guerreros.
A tremendous tag team match.
It really was, and it really proved that Los Guerreros was doing something, and they were very good in the ring. And less than a year later, Eddie was holding the belt, and Chavo was holding the Cruiserweight belt.
Brings us nicely on to a year later at Backlash 2004 from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Tremendous crowd for this one. It was the triple threat rematch from WrestleMania 20. It was never going to be able to top what had been done in Madison Square Garden a month previously, but I think this pay-per-view was enjoyable from the point of view that it had that classic match between Mick Foley and Randy Orton for the Intercontinental Championship. This was tremendous.
I'm sorry, this pay-per-view will be remembered for one reason. Jonathan Coachman got a win on pay-per-view.
It was incredible, wasn't it? The Raw brand on its own, doing its own pay-per-view.
Again, as a kid, actually got into this pay-per-view in John the Coachman's corner. Of course, then they had the rematch between Chris Jericho and Christian. It was good that they pulled out a good match because they really did perform at WrestleMania.
I kind of disagree with you on that. I thought they did well at WrestleMania.
It was flat. Like, it was a well better match. Even though Trish Stratus was still a fumble, I still think it was a better match.
We'll agree to disagree on that one, Jerry. What about Backlash 2005? This had a big build-up with one more match for Hulk Hogan as he teamed with Shawn Michaels for the first time ever to take on Muhammad Hassan and Daivari. Loved the build-up to this match. Really had the atmosphere going into it. And this pay-per-view, though, I mean, as much as they built it up around that and Triple H Batista too, it will be remembered for the shocking moment where Viscera turned on Trish Stratus and squashed her like a pancake. I loved it, Jerry. I just loved it because it wasn't what we were expecting.
Yeah, and another
he
thing
really got the fans behind him, you know.
And another thing that really got the fans going in this, and it's a great match as well, was for the Intercontinental Championship, Shelton Benjamin and Chris Jericho. Great match.
Oh, it was a tremendous match, absolutely.
And of course, they say you were happy with the tag time turmoil. Still continued on the Backlash 2005.
I just got to tell you one thing. It was just a backlash that will probably live long in the memory because the last man standing match between Edge and Benoit was phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, Benoit usually had a lot of good matches on pay-per-views like this. This is one of the big things going into WrestleMania 24. Benoit was always known as the choke artist until Royal Rumble 2003, in my opinion, of the big-time matches. He couldn't really live up to the big-time matches, but once he could, he should have held that belt a lot longer than he did.
Oh, without a doubt. I've always got issue that he never held it longer.
And the only reason that Randy Orton won that belt was to take the record away from Brock Lesnar. You know?
Yeah, and it's only now with the history that they're actually acknowledging that he is the youngest WWE champion again. Because remember, Orton didn't win the WWE championship; he won the World Heavyweight Championship. So technically, Lesnar still is the youngest champion.
But of course, this brings us into WrestleMania, Backlash 2006, as we had a shocking appearance by God.
I think this feud got taken to ridiculous levels. I mean, they really should have ended it after WrestleMania 22, in my opinion. But I suppose it did serve the purpose of bringing back DX in the summer.
Do you think it was pissing Vince McMahon off that no matter what he was doing on Shawn Michaels, he just couldn't get the crow teeth he used to get? And that's why he went to such extreme measures.
Yeah, bringing in his own religion.
You know, and of course the triple threat main event that really...
I really enjoyed that match now, but I didn't like the ending. I just thought it was a good match up until that, but the ending was bullshit, and then Triple H going mad with a sledgehammer and getting his music played at the end.
Of course,
so I've got to give props to Lita for taking the bump she did in that triple threat match.
Rob Van Dam and Shelton Benjamin, and the great winner takes it all into...
Yeah, stole the show, there's no doubt about it. And this, of course, led on to the Joey Styles shoot the next night on Raw. It was really good the way he wasn't...
Well, if you got bunked for Backlash, wouldn't you be a bit pissed off?
It was incredible, really, that he didn't get on that pay-per-view to call it.
But now we go on to Backlash why do I keep saying WrestleMania? But Backlash 2007, and yet again, Vince McMahon and Shane gets on this card as they teamed up with Umaga to take on Bobby Lashley, as a moment a lot of people see as the official death of ECW.
Without a doubt it was the official death, but you gotta love the backstage segment where McMahon was rubbing it up to the originals. That was pretty funny, but overall it just sent out the message that they were totally bastardizing ECW.
Of course, this would also be remembered as the name Mark Calloway really took it too far. And
this was just ridiculous. I'm still pissed off to this day about this. Why did they have to go to those measures? They didn't need that spot. We could have had a whole summer of Calloway.
You know, Calloway, he took a ridiculous spot. Everyone is in agreement with that. With his age, his height, and his mobility, he should not be taking spots like that. And of course, the main event was John Cena winning that fatal four-way match for...
And remember how he won it with the sweet chin music off Shawn Michaels to Randy Orton, and then he rolled on for the pin or something like that. I can't even remember the ins and outs of it, but, you know... And this was the pay-per-view where the brand split had actually ended and they were going back to the three brands, and it was a pile of piss pay-per-view.
You know,
I don't even want to talk about fucking Backlash 2008. I want to go on to the last...
No, Backlash 2008 has to be acknowledged.
It's going to be acknowledged for one man, isn't it?
It has to be acknowledged for the Big Show and Great Khali tearing the roof off the place.
And also Mike Adamle making his pay-per-view commentary debut in the classic ECW title match between Kane and Chavo Guerrero.
that actually got time this time. People complain about Daniel Bryan only getting 18 seconds, with Chavo Guerrero Kane only got 8 seconds, and Kane didn't even get a fucking entrance.
So no one gave a shit.
Of course, this match is also remembered for a fantastic match between The Undertaker and Edge.
Yeah, that was enjoyable, I have to say.
And it was a shocking fatal 4 elimination match as Triple H finally wins the belt back off Randall Keith Orton.
Yeah, didn't really wash with me now, I have to say, and I know it didn't wash with you.
But Shawn Michaels and Batista, as much as we were criticising Batista back in, he really stepped up to the mark and proved that he should have been in a bigger match at WrestleMania 24. Him and Michaels had a fantastic match at this Backlash.
Yeah, with Jericho as the referee, and that would, of course, lead on to the big feud between Jericho and HBK.
Personally, my favourite feud in 5 years. That was a fantastic feud.
Yeah, it was fantastic because they gave us the time to breathe and nurture and develop, and that's
well, for some reason you've been gagging to get to Backlash 2000.
Yeah, I've been gagging to get to the last ever Backlash, and this is where we're going to wrap up this look back, because I don't really think the other pay-per-views, the Extreme Rules that followed, are worth even mentioning on the International Wrestling Podcast. But I do want to say one thing: really enjoyed that main event, the last ever match that John Cena and Edge had, the last man standing match. Just thought it was absolutely tremendous. So much shit they took in that match, and the ending was tremendous with Big Show throwing him into that light bulb. I didn't see it coming.
The thing that ruined that for me is that should have been seen as thing to go away for a month or two. But after getting thrown through a light bulb that way, he comes back out the next night on Raw.
Didn't make any sense.
Of course, Jeff Hardy finally got his win over Matt Hardy in the Night Quit match. But the reason this pay-per-view was always fondly talked about was Santino Marella defeating Beth Phoenix in 3 seconds.
And the love interest of the great Khali and Santina, and JR getting mentioned as a love interest of Santina. Let's not forget that shocking moment of Backlash. And Ricky Steamboat deserves a mention for having a great match with Chris Jericho.
That's what I was going to bring up next. That is an honourably mentioned. That was a fantastic match. And Steamboat's one of these guys to prove he still has it. But yet again, he doesn't come back and hog the spotlight.
So we're going to leave it there, JR. And as I say, hopefully when we're doing this next year, we'll be talking good things about Extreme Rules 2012.
Hopefully, but you know my opinion on that.